Performative or performativeness. It's a word that keeps coming up in my feed. I interpret it as meaning that you are doing something not natural to you, but rather to make an impression on others for one purpose or another. So, breaking actions down into categories, we have those things that you absolutely must do, that we all must do, like the chores. They are not performative because we would do them no matter who was looking. And then there are the things we legitimately love doing, and we again would do them regardless of who is looking. And so they are not performative. So, for example, a person who goes to church because they want to look like a good person, but they actually don't enjoy going to church, that's performative. But a person who goes to church because they truly love it isn't. That comes from a place of happiness and sincerity. It is the truth, an alignment between the outer appearance and the inner state and intention. The things we do as the joy set before us are not performative. So, this leaves what we do for appearances. And it's possible to be doing things for appearance in the midst of our chores and delights. Non-performative acts can be carried out from under a veneer of performativeness. Like you can be doing non-performative tasks while wearing a performative skin. I see an inverse relationship between one's baseline level of happiness and the likelihood that they will behave or present in a performative way. Performativeness can be conscious or unconscious in a way, but I guess conscious performativeness is more like pandering. The videos I see talk about performativeness in the context of dating. So the performative man or woman will dress, speak, present, or carry themselves in a way that's not natural to them. Sometimes a performative suitor will target a desired individual, feigning interest in or identification with some facet of the target's world, like a hobby, topic, sport, or even their identity. There are lots of reasons to reject performative suitors, but the one that's most compelling to me is the fact that it's evidence of some sense of inner lacking, a neediness that's repellent, and makes more likely that the suitor believes a relationship will bring a happiness that is ongoing and presently unknown to them. But what will happen in reality is that the novelty of the relationship will create a happiness that will persist for some time and then dissipate with familiarity. And then the problems will ensue. Finding a successful partner has much to do with discerning somebody who's truly happy from somebody who's just looking that way on the surface. But beyond the relationship context, the performance can target a group of people or even the public at large, like this difference between pandering and fawning, different flavors of performativeness. So pandering politicians are performative to the slice of the public that stands before them at that moment. The availability of abundant, unedited, and candid footage nowadays makes that apparent. Politicians will change their cadence and speech pattern to fit the audience, or try to use in-group lingo or expressions that they don't come by honestly or use in other settings. Pandering is performative. Pandering is an imitation of fawning, like it's stunt double. They are similar looking fruits and they come from the same tree of ignorance, but they each arise from a different type of neediness in the heart, a different kind of void in the hungry ghost. The person who fawns is performative, but it's from a place of genuine desire for the object of their attention. But while the person who panders exhibits similar behavior, it arises from cynical motives, not genuine interest in the target. They want something else. And while they may have had childhood trauma, at this moment, they are consciously manipulating rather than unconsciously fawning. This is a common thing. So I'm not trying to single out or malign anyone in particular. The instruction of spirituality as a practical means to emotional intelligence is as suppressed a subject to the general population as is the teaching of economics to children. There are certain subjects, the ubiquitous instruction of which would expose certain scams, such as the economic lie that is rehypothecation and the spiritual lie that is identitarianism and division. Authoritarians want slave bodies inhabited by hungry ghosts. There are many people who routinely speak in a way that was not spoken in the household in which they grew up. Sometimes it's not performative, meaning the speech pattern of most people outside the home in the area was vastly different than those inside, and so the person adapts to the world around them, despite it being different than in the home. I have to give a lot of detail and examples in my videos because a lot of people can't read between the lines. Like, if you say something that takes a certain mental leap to connect the dots, there are people who will use their inability to connect those dots to make arguments against what you're saying. So it's like I have to go through every possibility to flesh out every exceptional case. It's like, I know some of you are smarter than I am. It's an absolute certainty. I'm not the endpoint of the bell curve. So the number of small concepts I need to string together to make a point, the number of teeth on the gear, so to speak, doesn't have to be as many with those of you who are smarter than I am. But for people who need it spelled out and need every exception fleshed out, I'm going to cover all those things. So yeah, I'm verbose. The detection of performativeness is like how if you have an animal that hates going to the vet, as they all do, they'll pick up on the fact that you're doing something out of the ordinary, and they'll make themselves scarce. Like your dog or cat is so familiar with your patterns, and as long as you're in those patterns, they're not suspicious of you at all. But when you step out of that pattern and seem to have an interest in them somehow, or corralling them, they see that difference. Like, they know you're acting suspicious, and they're going to hide. So like the performative person kind of should look to you the way your cat might view you as you're trying to finagle them into the carrier. I'd say that performativeness runs inverse to generalized happiness. To be performative is to be in departure from the truth. It is to be more consciously living through the lens of a false identity. Everyone in the play of life is operating through a false identity. What's aware of conditioning can never be that of which it's aware, and what's aware is what you are. But people who identify as people are not consciously aware of this, nor are performative panderers, but they are operating through two layers of false identity, one of which they are unconscious, as everyone else, and another on top of that of which they are conscious, their character. As such, they are disconnected from the truth by two layers. The disconnection from truth of which the uninstructed worldling is not aware makes them unhappy, but it does not make them self-conscious necessarily. But when a person is being performative, the more conscious they are of it, the more disconnected from the truth they are, and thus the more disconnected from that unknown source of happiness that people seek wrongly in acquisition and experience to bring their attention into the moment. Like, if they know they are being performative, they are either doing it for pure or cynical reasons. Like the politician and the scammer, they are cynical. But the person with childhood PTSD who fawns over important people, they are sincere. But both of these are hungry ghosts. They're just exhibiting similar behavior from different flavors of neediness. And there's no reason why somebody can't have both going on at the same time. Public figures who have to wear a mask can very often be the survivors of trauma, and thus also be subject to the inner arrangement that makes for this hunger for approval, this fawning. So they can be fawners and panderers. Social media is the largest venue for the expression of performativeness, and as such is an attractive nuisance for those who need approval, who need the approval of everyone who they deem righteous or relevant. So in this video I've described just a couple of the fruits of unconsciousness, but there are many others. Unconsciousness is difficult to address because the fruits that it bears are so problematic and yet so different from each other that on the surface it would seem that each one would require a different strategy to attack that may involve persuasion, coercion, or violence. Like, you must attack this, with anti that. Like, you're not going to stop racism with anti-racism because you're just attacking a particular identity, not the general public's propensity for, and especially not the cause of identitarianism itself. No. That propensity is ended through the dispelling of the ignorance that is body identification. Jiddu Krishnamurti said, when you call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you are being violent because it creates division, which breeds violence. At the heart of it is that ignorance of body identification. That's the root. And so in addressing that, you address all the fruits. But if you try to crush all these different fruits of unconsciousness, it only plants more trees of unconsciousness, more cycle of bloodletting. Changing course a bit. If you think about it at a high level, the desire for food and sex are the only things that keep us embodied. Like, we would starve without food and we die off without sex. But even like at the micro level, at the U level, if you had zero desire for food or sex, you might just drift out of your body. Like, it's said that Paramahansa Ramakrishna was so highly ascended that the only thing that kept him in the world was his love of food. So, in the natural world, in the absence of the abundance that technology provides, which imposes limiting factors on our consumption of these things, it was not evolutionarily necessary to put a governor on them, so to speak. Gluttony is good for survival in nature. It's like this video game I once bought. It was a re-release of a game series from the 80s, the Ultima series, if you want to look it up. And at that time, the state of computing power, like in the 80s, was such that these games could barely run on the machines of their time. And thus, there was no coding put in place to cap the speed at which the things in the game moved. So when the games were re-released verbatim with the same exact code, they were unplayable without modification, because everything, including the avatar, moved at like unmanageable speeds. Technology has exposed the weakness in us, that is, our lack of a governor for the indulgence of abundance. Like, we're like that game. We have no cap. And while it's true that we are in the moment limited by our physical capacity to eat and copulate, and we get jaded for lack of variety, the introduction of technology that lets us get more of these things than is physically good for us evidences some deficiency in our internal governor, to the extent that we are subject to those excesses. The limiting factors imposed on us by the natural world makes unlimited sexual and dietary opportunism the optimal strategy for survival. And so that's what we're dealing with. When bereft of these limiting factors, we can become obese and depraved, even psychotic, if deprived of meaningful pursuits, which is a mitigant. In the absence of meaning and in the presence of abundance, we suffer a similar trajectory as the mice in the Universe 25 experiment, which I touched on in a previous video recorded in June of 2025. The challenge our species faces with the invention of technology is having to survive abundance without the benefit of a robust internal governor, apart from whatever we can cultivate through culture. Like, through culture, we have mental software that can make us survivable in the face of abundance, but it relies on meaning. There's an inverse relationship between the perception of meaning and the power of the hungry ghost. Meaning distracts us from our appetites, and an absence of perceived meaning sharpens them and our awareness of them. Spirituality is the cultivation of mental software that eliminates the need for meaning to mitigate the consequence of appetite in the face of abundance. Religion, on the other hand, is the cultivation of mental software that supplies the meaning requisite to outwardly mimic the positive consequences of spirituality. In religion, the hungry ghost remains, but is regulated by the bounds of aversion. In spirituality, there is a true diminishing of both desire and aversion, and the software that's used to cultivate that only establishes the inner conditions wherein that lack of need appears. The software of spirituality does not run continuously as an inner policeman, as does religion. The software of spirituality, once it has accomplished its aim, can uninstall itself and go away, like how the Buddha compares the Dhamma to a raft that can be discarded once the river is crossed. It severs the connection between the mental body and the energy body that's facilitated by the ignorance that says, I am the body. In lack of body-mind identification, there is no sense of being the thing to which ideas relate, and without the sense of being the subject of thoughts, they gain no purchase over the energy body. You cannot be triggered in such a lack of unconscious identification, and in this liberation of the energy body from the whims of the mind relative to circumstance, it is unbound, and thus the perception of this energy body appears, and it begins to expand, and there's the perception of its vibrations ascension, as well as the ascension of its position in the form. And that is the end of the hungry ghost, from which all of the fruits of unconsciousness arise. Not any anti-ism, this or that, or identitarianism.
That's all for now.